I didn't notice the words at first. The music, the laughter, the clinking of soda cans and paper cups, all of it blurred into the usual noise of a birthday party. It was one of those suburban evenings where nothing extraordinary was supposed to happen. Balloons still floated half, deflated near the ceiling, cake crumbs scattered across plastic plates, and the hum of conversations rolled through the house like a low tide. The celebration was messy, ordinary, forgettable, until a single sentence cut through it like a blade. Someone, I still don't know who exactly because the voice slipped out from a cluster of people near the kitchen table, said it so casually, so off, hand as if tossing away a piece of gum wrapper. Daniel? He's from the others. That was it. Just a phrase. But for me, those 4 words split the night open. My chest locked, my stomach turned cold, and every nerve in my body screamed as if a hidden alarm had finally gone off. The others. So like it was nothing, like it didn't carry weight, like it wasn't the secret I had fought to bury under years of silence and careful smiles. I froze. My eyes darted, searching for faces, trying to place the voice. Who said it? Did they mean it as a joke, or a slip, or a cruel little revelation meant to stir whispers? I couldn't tell, but in the end, it didn't matter. The words were already loose in the air, like smoke you can't put back into the fire. And then I realized Alex heard it. He wasn't close enough to be part of that careless group, but he was near enough that the words reached him. I saw it the moment it landed. His head turned slightly, his grin faltered in the middle of a laugh with someone else, and his eyes flicked toward me, sharp, searching, unsettled. He didn't have to say anything. His silence was loud enough. I felt his gaze lock onto me, not with disgust, not even with anger, but with a kind of shock that unsettled me more than anything else. It was as if, in an instant, the person who knew me best was suddenly staring at a stranger. The distance between us stretched invisible but unmissable. Time slowed. The noise of the party kept moving, kids still shouting over music, the birthday candles already blown out and forgotten. But for me, everything narrowed down to that one look between us. My lungs felt tight, like I had forgotten how to breathe. My palms prickled with sweat, though the room was too warm already. I wanted to speak, to laugh it off, to throw in some meaningless line that would break the moment before it hardened into something permanent. But the words wouldn't come. They clogged in my throat, heavy and useless. My body betrayed me. I just stood there, frozen, staring back at him. Alex's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, the smallest crack in his usual easy confidence. His lips parted like he was about to say something, then closed again. His shoulders straightened, then sagged. And in that pause, in that indecision, an entire history of friendship trembled. We had always been close. Too close, some people joked. Best friends, inseparable since childhood. We shared secrets, routines, the kind of unspoken trust that feels indestructible when you're young. But now that trust was teetering, balancing on the edge of a truth I had never let him see. The phrase, "he's from the others," echoed in my head with a cruel rhythm. I hated it, hated how vague it sounded to anyone else, yet how sharp it felt to me. It was like someone had thrown open a locked door in the middle of the room and pointed at me without even realizing what they had done. To them, maybe it was gossip. To me, it was exposure. And Alex had caught it. He had caught me. For a moment longer we looked at each other. His brows furrowed slightly, confusion shadowing his usually clear face. He didn't step toward me, didn't turn away either. Just stood there, caught between knowing and not wanting to know. That hesitation was unbearable. I felt my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, drowning out the laughter, the clatter of plates, the hum of conversation. I wanted him to look away, to pretend he hadn't heard, to let it vanish into the blur of a busy night. But he didn't. His eyes stayed on me, steady, uncertain, asking questions he wasn't ready to voice. And I couldn't answer them. Not there. Not then. So I did what I always did when the weight became too much. I shut down. I forced a smile at someone nearby, nodded at a joke I hadn't actually heard, lifted my cup as if to drink though it was empty. I acted like nothing had happened, like my world hadn't just tilted on its axis. But Alex knew. I could see it in the stiffness of his posture, The way his laughter came slower after that, the way his glances kept drifting back toward me even as he tried to carry on. Something had shifted. Something unspoken had taken root between us, and no amount of pretending could erase it. The birthday party went on. People sang off, key. The birthday kid unwrapped gifts with dramatic flair. More drinks were poured, and conversations rolled forward like nothing unusual had happened. But for me, the night had already ended. The damage was done. Because in a single careless sentence, the truth I had fought so hard to keep hidden had been dragged into the open. And the worst part wasn't that strangers had heard it. The worst part was that Alex had. The silence between us that night wasn't ordinary. It wasn't the kind that came when conversations lulled or when we both sat comfortably without speaking. No, this silence was heavy, jagged, alive with tension. It filled the room more loudly than music. It followed me every step, pressing into my chest, whispering one merciless fact. Nothing would ever be the same again. The park was almost empty when I arrived, as if the night itself had conspired to strip away distractions, leaving only shadows and silence. The swings creaked faintly in the warm breeze, their rusted chains groaning like they carried secrets of their own. I sat down, not because I wanted to, but because my legs refused to carry me any further. The ground beneath the swing was already scarred with lines from shoes, thousands of invisible stories pressed into the dirt. None of them mattered now. Tonight, only one story mattered, and it was unraveling whether I liked it or not. The air smelled faintly of cut grass and dust, the kind of scent that always used to calm me. But tonight it felt suffocating. Every breath was too heavy, every sound too sharp. I wanted to run, to vanish, to find some excuse that would allow me to disappear before he arrived. And yet I stayed because part of me knew I had been waiting for this moment longer than I wanted to admit. I heard his footsteps before I saw him. Gravel crunching under sneakers, slow, hesitant, dragging slightly as though he too wasn't sure if he wanted to be here. My heart thudded violently in my chest. I didn't turn. I couldn't. If I looked at him too soon, I was afraid my face would betray everything. Is it true? His voice was quiet but not soft. It cut through the air with a sharp edge, forcing me to look at him. For a long second, I said nothing. I just stared at the ground, watched the dust swirl near my shoes, as if it could give me courage. But there was no escape in silence. Finally, I nodded. A single, tiny movement, but enough to shatter the fragile lie I had been living in for years. Alex didn't flinch, but I saw the tension in his jaw, the way his hands pressed deep into his hoodie pockets as though he was holding himself together. His eyes stayed fixed on me, not with anger, but with something worse, confusion. Since when? His tone wasn't accusing, but the weight behind it made my chest tighten. Since always, I whispered. My throat was dry, the words nearly cracking on the way out. I just never said it out loud. The silence that followed was brutal. The park seemed to amplify it. Every creak of the swings, every rustle of the leaves, only deepening the void between us. I wanted to fill it, to explain, to tell him that the fear of losing him had always been greater than the fear of being found out. But I couldn't. Not yet. Why didn't you tell me? His voice was steadier this time, but quieter too, as though he wasn't sure he wanted the answer. Because I was afraid, I said finally. Not of you. Of what it might change. Of what it might break. He turned his head slightly, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. Then he exhaled, long and slow, a sound almost like surrender. I don't care, he said. For a moment my chest lifted, hope surging through me like sudden light in the dark. But then he added, I do. Obviously. I don't know how I feel. Not about you, just about this. All of it. The words lodged in me like thorns. He wasn't rejecting me, not outright, but he wasn't accepting me either. He was suspended between two truths, and I was the one caught in the middle. You don't get it, I said quietly, sharper than I meant to. My voice shook, frustration slipping through the cracks. This isn't something I chose to keep from you like a joke or a secret stash of candy. This is me, every day, and hiding it, hiding myself, was the only way I knew how to keep you close. His eyes flickered, hurt flashing for a second. Then he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the ground as though it might give him clarity. "I should have known," he muttered. "How did I not see it? We've spent half our lives together." "Because I didn't want you to," I said bitterly. "Because I got good at pretending, especially around you." It seemed to sting, though he didn't argue. He kicked at the gravel beneath his feet, little stones scattering into the dirt, sparks of tension breaking the silence. "I'm not mad," he said after a while. His voice was softer but firm. "I'm just surprised." I nodded, swallowing the tightness in my throat. Surprised was better than angry. Surprised was better than disgusted. But it still left me stranded in the same place, waiting for him to decide what this meant for us. Finally, he turned his face toward me again, his eyes searching mine with a mix of honesty and unease. "I don't know what to do with this," he admitted. "I don't know how to hold it, or how to be around you without wondering what I missed, what I didn't see." I held his gaze, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Then don't overthink it. Just stay. That's all I've ever wanted. For you to stay." He looked at me for a long moment, and in his eyes, I saw the battle playing out. Fear, loyalty, confusion, affection, all of it clashing in silence. Finally, he nodded, almost imperceptibly. "I'm not going to ghost you," he said. His words were simple, but they hit with the force of a promise. "I just need time." And with that, he stood. The gravel shifted under his shoes as he stepped back into the shadows, leaving me on the swing, the air around me heavy with everything we hadn't said. I watched him go, my hands gripping the chains until my knuckles turned white. I didn't know if he would come back tomorrow, or next week, or at all. But I knew one thing. The silence between us had finally broken, and the truth was out. And once spoken, it could never be taken back. We walked back together without speaking, our steps falling in rhythm out of habit rather than choice. The streets were quiet, the kind of quiet that belongs to late evening in a neighborhood where most lights are already out, where the hum of televisions replaces the laughter of the day. Each step seemed louder than it should have been, the scrape of gravel under our shoes, the soft scuff of rubber on concrete. I wanted to break the silence, to ask him what he was thinking, but my throat refused to open. The conversation in the park still echoed in my head, raw and unfinished. Alex had left me with half answers, with promises of time instead of clarity, and now here we were, walking side by side, two shadows stretched thin under the street lamps. His house loomed at the end of the block, familiar, yet suddenly threatening. I had been there countless times before, birthdays, study sessions, summer afternoons wasted with video games and takeout pizza. It had always been a safe place, a place where laughter filled the hallways and the smell of his father's grilling drifted out into the yard. But tonight the air around it felt different, colder, heavier, as though the walls themselves knew something had shifted. As we stepped up the walkway, the porch light was already on, casting a pale glow across the yard. At first, I thought nothing of it. Then I noticed the figure behind the screen door. Alex slowed his pace, almost imperceptibly, but I felt it. His shoulders stiffened, his stride faltered just enough for me to catch it. My chest tightened. The door creaked open, slow and deliberate. His father stood framed in the light, back straight, arms at his sides. He didn't speak. He didn't even nod in acknowledgement the way he always used to. Instead, he just looked at us. The kind of look that doesn't need words, because it already says too much. I felt Alex freeze beside me. Not with obvious drama, but with a subtle shift I could sense through the air between us. The tension poured off him, silent and sharp, like static in the moments before a storm breaks. My instinct was to step back, to fade into the darkness, to become invisible. But my legs betrayed me and kept me planted there, exposed under the porch light. His father's gaze swept over us once, slow and unreadable, before settling. It wasn't shock I saw, and it wasn't outright anger. It was something worse, absence, a deliberate withholding, as if to say, I see you, but I will not acknowledge you. The weight of that silence pressed harder than any shouted word could have. I tried to nod, to break the moment with a polite gesture, the same way I had done 100 times before. But this time he didn't return it. He just stood there, still as stone, eyes narrowing slightly, lips pressed into a thin line. The air between us thickened, heavy enough to choke on. Alex shifted, finally forcing words past the tension. "I'll text you," he said quickly, his voice clipped, quieter than usual. He didn't look at me when he said it. His eyes were fixed ahead, locked on the doorway, on the figure waiting there. I swallowed hard, nodding in return, though my throat burned with everything I couldn't say. I wanted to stay, to insist on normalcy, to prove that nothing had changed. But the message in that silence was too clear. Something had changed, and it wasn't welcome here. Alex climbed the steps slowly, each footfall echoing louder than the last. I stayed on the walkway, rooted to the spot, watching him cross the threshold as though he were stepping into a different world, one where I no longer belonged. The door closed behind him with a softness that still managed to echo in my chest. I stood there for a moment longer, the porch light glaring against my eyes, before finally turning away. The walk home felt uneven, each step off balance, as though the ground itself had shifted beneath me. The streets were silent, but inside my head the noise was deafening. The look on his father's face repeated itself over and over. Not hatred, not rage, but that cold, distant silence. It was worse than rejection. It was erasure. By the time I reached my own house, my chest was tight with unspoken words. I sat down by the window, staring out into the night, half expecting a message to appear on my phone, some small signal from Alex to undo the heaviness of what had just happened. But the screen stayed dark, the minutes stretching into hours. That night, I realized it wasn't only my secret that had been exposed. It was us, our closeness, our quiet bond, the way we walked together as if the world belonged to us. Someone else had seen it now, and though no words had been spoken, the judgment had been delivered all the same. And in that silence, I understood something chilling. Sometimes the harshest condemnation comes not in what is said, but in what is withheld. The days that followed were the longest I had ever known. Time didn't move forward so much as drag me across broken glass, each hour scraping raw against my nerves. I carried my phone everywhere, waiting for it to light up with his name, some signal that we hadn't reached the end. But the screen stayed blank. Notifications came from others, classmates sharing memes, group chats buzzing with leftover jokes from the birthday, but nothing from him. Each silence from Alex was louder than any noise I'd ever heard. I tried distracting myself, throwing my focus into trivial tasks. I cleaned my room until the shelves gleamed. I walked circles around the block, shoes wearing thin against the pavement. I even tried watching movies, hoping the dialogue would drown out the thoughts looping endlessly in my head. Nothing worked. The silence returned, heavier each time. By the third night, I sat on my porch long after the streetlights flickered on, staring at the darkness as though it might answer me. I thought of his father's eyes, cold and sharp, and of Alex's back as he disappeared through that door. 100 times I told myself it was over, that the distance between us had grown too wide. And yet a part of me refused to believe it. The Alex I knew wasn't someone who vanished. He was someone who stayed, who fought, who carried me through every storm we'd ever faced. Surely this couldn't be the moment he left me behind. When it finally happened, it was almost ordinary. A soft knock at the window. For a heartbeat, I thought I had imagined it, another trick of a desperate mind. But then it came again, steadier this time, and when I pulled back the curtain, he was there, standing in the glow of the streetlight, shoulders hunched, hands clenched in the pockets of his hoodie. His face was pale, tight with some battle he had clearly been fighting inside himself. I opened the window without a word. He climbed in as he had 100 times before, but the air was different now, weighted with everything unsaid. He sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the floor as though the words he needed had been carved into the carpet. I waited, heart thundering, afraid to push. Finally, his voice broke the silence. "I was scared," he said quietly, not looking at me, not moving, just forcing the words out as if they burned. I stayed silent, letting him continue. "I wasn't scared of you," he added, the words tightening in his throat. "I was scared of what it would mean, of what people would think, of what he would think." His hands clenched tighter in his pockets. "But these last days, all I could feel was the space where you weren't. And I realized I'm more afraid of losing you than of disappointing anyone else. The words struck me harder than I expected, not with pain, but with something sharper. Hope. I swallowed hard, afraid to speak in case I shattered the fragile honesty hanging between us. He finally looked up at me, his eyes raw, unsettled but clear. I don't have answers. I don't know what I'm supposed to call this, what it means, where it goes. But I know I don't want to walk away. Not from you. I exhaled slowly, only then realizing I had been holding my breath. My voice came out softer than I intended, but steady. I don't need you to have answers, Alex. I just need you to be here. Something shifted in his expression then, not relief exactly, but something close. A release of tension, a quiet surrender. He nodded once, sharply, like he was sealing a promise with himself more than with me. We sat in silence after that, but it wasn't the same silence as before. It wasn't the heavy, suffocating quiet of confusion and fear. It was a silence filled with choice, with presence. He was here. That was enough. After a while, he spoke again, voice low but certain. Let's not rush. Let's not name it, or force it, or try to explain it to anyone. Let's just figure out together. I nodded. That's all I want. He gave a small, almost imperceptible smile, the kind I hadn't seen in days, and for the first time since that night at the birthday party, I felt the ground beneath my feet steady. We didn't need labels. We didn't need declarations or dramatic confessions. What we needed was this, the quiet decision to stand together against the noise of the world. To choose each other, even when everything else pushed us apart. As the night stretched on, we talked about nothing and everything, school, movies, places we wanted to see one day. But beneath the words was something stronger, an understanding that didn't require explanation. The fear hadn't vanished, the shadows hadn't lifted entirely, but the choice had been made. We would face them side by side. When he finally left, slipping back through the window into the cool night air, he paused for a moment, glancing back at me. His expression was tired but softer, no longer burdened with the same crushing silence that had haunted us. I'll be back tomorrow, he said simply. And with that, he disappeared into the darkness. I stood there long after he was gone, the air in my room still warm with the weight of his words. For the first time in days, I felt something I thought I had lost. Not certainty, not clarity, but hope. And hope, I realized, was more powerful than any silence that had tried to destroy us. Weeks turned into months, and slowly the sharp edges of that night began to soften. Not because people forgot, but because Alex and I refused to let their whispers write our story. The world outside us kept moving. Birthdays, exams, the endless churn of school corridors filled with gossip and noise. But inside the space we carved out for ourselves, we chose something different. We chose honesty, even when it was uncomfortable. We chose presence, even when silence would have been easier. We chose each other, even when it wasn't simple. There were still stares sometimes, the kind you feel rather than see. The way certain people paused a little too long when they spotted us walking together, their eyes narrowing as if searching for proof of some suspicion. A laugh here, a whisper there, the kind of background noise meant to unsettle. But Alex never flinched. If anything, he walked taller beside me, his shoulders squared, his stride deliberate. It was his way of saying, I am not ashamed to be here. At home, things remained complicated. His father didn't speak of it. Not directly, but the distance was there. Meals eaten in silence, questions left unasked, a coldness that pressed against the walls of their house. Sometimes Alex came to me with shadows under his eyes, the weight of that silence dragging him down. Yet every time he did, he reminded me, quietly, stubbornly, that he was still choosing this, choosing us. And in that choice, there was defiance. I learned to measure time, not in days, but in the small moments that proved we were still standing. The text messages that arrived in the middle of the night, simple words that carried more meaning than entire conversations. Still awake. Wish you were here. Today was easier because of you. The afternoon spent at the park, where the swings creaked and the air smelled faintly of dust, and yet the silence between us no longer suffocated but held us steady. The way his laughter slowly returned, lighter now, no longer weighed down by unspoken questions. There were still doubts, of course. There were days when his words came haltingly, when his thoughts circled like trapped birds. What if it changes everything? He'd ask quietly, eyes fixed on the ground. And I would answer with the only truth I knew. It already has. But maybe that isn't a bad thing. It was never about grand declarations. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone else. What we built was quieter, steadier, like a fire that doesn't roar but refuses to go out. It lived in the way he leaned against me when words failed, in the way I saved him the last bite of something sweet without thinking, in the way our conversations wandered from nonsense to honesty without warning. Each choice was small, but together they formed something unshakable. His father's silence never truly vanished, but its power weakened. The more Alex chose to live openly beside me, the less room there was for that silence to control him. And maybe that was the real victory. Not changing the mind of someone who refused to see, but refusing to let that refusal define us. One night, months later, we sat in my backyard under a wide sky scattered with stars. The air was cool, filled with the hum of distant traffic and the occasional bark of a dog down the street. Alex stretched out on the grass, arms folded behind his head, while I sat beside him, knees drawn up, watching the patterns of light overhead. After a long silence, he spoke. "I don't know what we are," he said, his voice thoughtful, not troubled. I looked down at him, at the faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "We don't have to know," I replied. He nodded, eyes still fixed on the sky. "But I'm glad it's us." And in that moment, with the world quiet around us, I understood the truth we had been circling all along. We didn't need labels or answers. We didn't need validation from those who chose to judge. What mattered was the choice we made every day, to show up, to stand beside each other, to let hope outweigh fear. The fear never disappeared entirely. It still lingered at the edges, a reminder of the world outside, of the risks that came with being different, but no longer ruled us. We carried it together, and in that togetherness, it lost its power. Looking back, I realized the story was never about a single sentence whispered at a birthday party or a silence heavy on a front porch. It was about what came after, the decision not to let those moments define the rest of our lives. The strength we found in choosing for ourselves. The quiet resilience of friendship that refused to break. Because in the end, judgment didn't win. Fear didn't win. We did. And maybe that was enough to carry us through anything.